welcome to Korean Cinema Today, the podcast of the Korean Film Council. Here in Seoul, this is Pierce Conran, and we'll be talking today a little bit about Korean cinema. Korean Cinema Today from KOBIZ is the podcast of the Korean Film Council. You can keep up with all the latest news and features at our website, which is koreanfilm.or.kr, and you will also find our webzine there, also named Korean Cinema Today, as well as our newsletter, which you can subscribe to. To find this podcast again, you can find it there on the website or also on iTunes, where you just need to type in the search term Korean Cinema Today. Engage with us also on social media. We're very active on Twitter and Facebook. Our handle on Twitter is Korean Film Biz, that's B-I-Z, and on Facebook you can find us at facebook.com/kobiz.kofic, that's KOBIZ.KOFIC. So I'm Pierce Conran. I'm a journalist for the Korean Film Council, as well as the Korean correspondent for international film site twitchfilm.com, and the editor of smaller Korean film blog Modern Korean Cinema. Today we have the great pleasure of having Darcy Paquet with us, a noted Korean film expert and the founder of KoreanFilm.org. Darcy, thanks very much for being here with us today.
Thanks for inviting me back.
It's always great to have Darcy here, and who has such a great wealth of knowledge about Korean film. So first, we're going to look a little bit of news, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Darcy and his career and some aspects of the promotion of Korean film overseas. So there were a few big casting announcements recently. What I found particularly exciting was the new Choi Dong-hoon film. He's making a film that's going to be called Assassination. I'm assuming that's a working title for the moment. They've pegged it as a $12 million budget, and they've offered leading roles to Ha Jung-woo, Lee Jong-jae, and Jeon Ji-hyun. Darcy, what do you think about this project? Is this something you're excited about?
Well, it is. I mean, this is a director who has been very successful with all of his previous films, and so you wonder if he can continue this string. But I mean, certainly it's a big budget production that's going to look really nice. It's they're going to put a lot of money into this film, and he's just really good at making entertaining, witty films with interesting characters. And so it seems like he's choosing good actors this time around, and I hope that more end up joining them.
Definitely. I mean, Lee Jong-jae and Jeon Ji-hyun, of course, were in The Thieves with him back in 2012. And I'm particularly interested about the 1930s setting, which kind of reminds me a little bit of In Context General Sun films. I know it'll be very different, but that's kind of an interesting period setting. Ha Jung-woo is, of course, on a hot streak. He's got another film, which he'll be making first. It's his second film as a director. His first one, of course, was Fasten Your Seatbelt last year. This new film is Chronicle of Blood Merchant, which is based on a Chinese novel by a writer called Yu Hua. I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And joining him on screen, he will also be starring in the film, is the actress Ha Ji-won. So this is another interesting film with a pretty big pairing. What do you think about this one, Darcy?
Yeah, and I'm very curious about this as well. I mean, it sounds like it's an interesting story, and I'll be curious to see how they move this to a Korean setting, because it's originally set during the Cultural Revolution in China.
In the 50s and 60s. I wonder if it's going to be contemporary or in the past for
this
one.
But, I mean, Ha Jung-woo has certainly proved himself as an actor, and if this movie is successful, then he'll be kind of taking the step up to being, like a Clint Eastwood type, character who excels at both. And so I liked his debut film, Roller Coaster, or Fasten Your Seatbelt. Mm-hmm. And it seemed that he does have this talent for working with actors and for, creating a certain tone in that film. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what he does on a slightly bigger scale.
Absolutely, me as well. And this is also a new project from NEW, who are on quite the hot streak themselves with some of the bigger films in recent memory. So having a quick look at some festival news, there's a few festivals that are going to be introducing some Korean films. In Santa Barbara, we have Intruders and Cold Eyes, and the new film Late Spring, which is going to be a world premiere from the director of 26 Years. This is a much smaller film, and I don't actually know very much about it. Also in Portland, there will be Hong Sang-soo's Nobody's Daughter Haewon, which premiered initially in Berlin last year, and also Juvenile Offender, which has been on quite a long streak on the festival circuit. Dublin will have Hong Sang-soo's second film from 2013, which is Our Son He, Yeon Sang-ho's very popular new animation The Fake, as well as the gangster film New World. The Black Movie Festival in Geneva just wrapped up, and they had 10 Korean films there, including both of Hong Sang-soo's films from last year. Sleepless Night, which I know is a favorite for both of us, and a number of films from last year's Jeonju International Film Festival. They have their digital project. They invited, out of the 3 films there, they invited 2 of them, and the third one, they invited the feature-length version, which was Scenery. And 2 shorts from the short program were there. The Body by the Park Jin-sung and Park Jin-suk brothers, and Lee Sang-woo's Exit, which was actually my favorite film at Jeonju last year. Darcy, what do you think about these films? Or these seem pretty obvious choices on the festival circuit?
Well, it's nice that they're showing this wide spectrum of mostly independent filmmaking from Korea these days. But if you compared, The Fake is a film that is certainly getting a lot of interest, and so it's good to see it continue to get invited to, in Dublin in this case. That was a very low-budget film, but I think it's leaving a really big impact. Hong Sang-soo, he always gets a lot of great exposure, but Sleepless Night and the other films that premiered at the Jeonju Film Festival are films that maybe a few years ago might have screened in Jeonju and then quietly disappeared, but it's good that other festivals are showcasing them, and they seem to be getting a bit more publicity now than they might have in the past.
Definitely. And regarding the Jeonju digital project, they're taking a step up this year. Instead of doing mid-length features, they're doing full-blown feature-length films, 3 of them. 2 of them are going to be Korean. One is Shin Yeon-chik's new film. He made Rough Play and Russian Novel last year. And the other is going to be Park Jong-bom, who famously made Journals of Musan, a very big player on the festival circuit for Korea a few years ago. Mm-hmm. One more news item is that CJ Entertainment are going to be producing 2 Vietnamese films, or rather co-producing them in Korea. CJ have had quite a presence internationally these days. In Vietnam, of course, their exhibition arm, CGV, bought out Megastar and are now the largest exhibitor in the country. So this is following the success of Wedding Invitation, which is a film made for China last year. This is an interesting development. How would you perceive this, Darcy?
Yeah, it's in line with CJ's strategy. They're also taking some steps in Indonesia as well in terms of the exhibition market. For me, I'm very curious to see what happens. Typically, we're used to big Hollywood studios kind of moving into other markets and trying to exert their influence. And Korea has a unique place in Asia, and Vietnam is a country that I think has a lot of talent and has a lot of potential. Certainly, the audience is growing, and but the infrastructure is undeveloped in many ways. And so, if CJ can play a role in kind of developing the infrastructure and helping filmmakers to make more ambitious films, then it will be exciting to see what is the result of that. So far, it seems that within Asia, that CJ is the one company that's really being active in this regard.
Very much. They're very ambitious.
Yeah.
I know CGV have planned to become the world's top exhibitor within 10 years or something. They're also looking at, I know they're looking into new opportunities in Malaysia and Indonesia as well. You mentioned poor infrastructure. These would be 2 places where you could, if they can really get their teeth in there, they could make quite a difference. So then, speaking of CJ, actually, their new film is the top film at the box office at the moment. The new film, Miss Granny. The Lunar New Year weekend was really enormous. It was actually, I think it was the biggest weekend ever at the Korean box office. Almost 5 million people went to the cinema. That's 1 in 10, which is just truly mind-boggling. It's a very big figure. And the kind of the big films there were Miss Granny and the Disney animation Frozen, which at first I don't think anyone would have expected to do this well. It's now the biggest animation of all time in Korea by 1 million. It's at 6 million now. The previous record was 5 million for Kung Fu Panda 2, and it seems that it's got quite a ways to go at this point. What do you make of that film's success?
I mean, in one sense, I think that this movie has really clicked with general audiences. You hear it. I mean, the song "Let It Go," you hear it everywhere.
Absolutely.
Not just in Korea, but everywhere. And so this is a film that's outperformed in all markets, but it's been particularly surprising in Korea. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe there are two aspects to that. One is that it's becoming more and more common for parents to bring their children to the theater. And so, of course, I brought my kids to see this film, but when you look at the box office, if you follow it, you see that on the weekends, these family films get a big boost, which didn't used to happen in the past. And so I think this is one sign that the demographics are changing in Korea, and that becoming a little bit more diverse, and not just focusing on younger viewers. But on the other hand, younger viewers really like this film. It touched a nerve, and so it's on those two fronts. I think it's doing very well.
Absolutely, as you say, it is a massive global success. It's not too far off the 1 billion mark worldwide, and certainly doing very well in Korea. We're seeing more audiences going to children's family fare in the country. A lot of animated films are doing a little better than they used to, and I'm excited to see a few kind of Korean animations come about and do well, but that remains to be seen. It's probably a discussion for another day. Now, the number one film is Miss Granny. There were 4 big movies that were being released for Lunar New Year, the others being Man in Love, Hot Young Bloods, and The Huntresses, but this was far and away the number one. What would you say accounts for its success?
I don't know, it's a really funny film. It's perhaps a little bit difficult for non-Korean audiences to appreciate because a lot of the humor in this film is verbal, and particularly the way that the main character speaks. It's about a woman who, an elderly woman who finds herself suddenly in the body of a 20-year-old, but she still acts and speaks like she used to in the past. And so it's this weird clash, this generation gap that we see in this one figure that provides for a lot of the film's humor. But yeah, just watching it was a fun experience. Everyone was really laughing through the film. There's a great cameo that comes at the end that I won't spoil. That. But commercially, the film just clearly kind of touched a nerve with the audience.
Definitely. It kind of reminiscent of the success of Miracle in Cell number 7 last year. Mm-hmm. If I dare say so, I'd say it's a better movie. But also about the translation, that's you wrote a column on Daum just this week about how this must have been a very difficult film to translate.
Yeah, I have no idea who ended up with the difficult task of translating this film. And I guess, translating dialect is very difficult because, so much of dialect is in the intonation and the delivery, and it's not just the particular words that you're using. But to translate this into English, first you'd have to choose some other regional dialect, and why one dialect over the other. And also, because it only appears in the text, I think that it will be quite awkward if you want to truly communicate, the full depth of the dialect in this work. So I don't know. Usually in these cases, you just kind of give up on a lot of the local humor, and you just kind of go and translate the content. But it is a shame that a lot of that will be lost for foreign viewers.
Of course, it's always a trick with comedies, particularly, and certainly a great challenge. But the film is doing very well, and early in 2014, the Korean box office is showing absolutely no signs of slowing down after a record year in 2013. So, Darcy, you wear many hats. You are the founder of KoreanFilm.org, which was the gateway for many people internationally to Korean film, myself included. You're the author of the book New Korean Cinema, Breaking the Waves. and you are also a lecturer at Kyunghee University and Korea University, as well as a consultant for the San Sebastian and Udine film festivals. That's the Udine Far East Film Festival. And you're a contributor to Daum, the large Korean portal. You have a column there, and you also write for South China Morning Post. Of course, recently you've also become an actor. You've appeared in half a dozen films, so that's an enormous, a lot of a great variety of things that you do. But going back, first of all, what is it that brought you here initially and got you interested in the industry?
The original thing was that when I was studying at grad school in the U.S. At Indiana University, I had a lot of friends from Korea, and they were very enthusiastic about cinema in general, and they were interested to tell me a bit about Korean cinema. I got my degree, which was in applied linguistics, and I was looking for teaching opportunities abroad, to teach English abroad. And I got a good offer from Korea at the alma mater, of one of my good friends, and so I decided to come over. And so really it was through these friends who I met in the U.S. that I became interested in Korea and in Korean cinema.
And so, what got you involved into the in the industry when you got here? Beyond just an interest in the films here.
Yeah, the first thing really was, living here, and I didn't speak Korean very well at the time. I just spoke a very little bit, but I was able to catch a couple films here and there, and I realized that there was a lot of, there were a lot of interesting films coming out at that time, but on the internet there was almost nothing being written about them. And so I decided just to make a small website to provide the little information that I knew at the time. I figured whatever I knew, I'll just put it up in English and I'll write some short reviews. But because I think it was the only source at that time, and like the first one that really emerged, I started getting a lot of emails from a lot of different people. And so this site, koreanfilm.org, it got bigger and bigger, and a number of people started to help me with it. And that really helped me to start a career in film, I think, because, I remember I was sort of inspired by a site about Chinese cinema that I'd found before launching my own site. Mm-hmm. And by Shelley Cressier. And at one point he'd mentioned he'd been interviewed by NPR, I think, and he put a note at the bottom of the interview and he said, if you make a website, then the world's media comes to you. And I always remember that line, and actually it's true. I think that, whereas previous to this time you would have had to kind of be good at networking to really get yourself into this industry, but thanks to the website, people ended up finding me, and I ended up finding a lot of interesting opportunities.
No, it's a brave new world, but you certainly forged a niche for yourself at that early time. So I mentioned the different roles you take on in the industry. It's truly an intimidating number of capacities in the industry. How do you find the time to kind of to juggle all these responsibilities?
Well, I think it's a couple things. Partly it's just that I don't have a full-time job. I'm working all these part-time jobs, and so when you list all the part-time jobs together, it looks like I'm doing more than maybe I actually am. And perhaps I have issues with work-life balance. I'm just a person who is very focused on doing a lot of different things related to cinema. And it's my profession, but it's also my hobby, and so it kind of takes up more time than my job ordinarily would. But I'm trying to get more balance these days.
I understand you completely. So, as a foreigner, have you ever had to face any challenges working in the industry here?
Less than I expected. And occasionally I've heard from other people who, other foreigners who specialize in cinema and who are living in either Thailand or Japan or other places, and they've expressed their frustration at not being accepted into the industry. And I think Korea's been much more accepting than I expected it to be. I think that my role in Korea is not that of an insider, but it's not that of an outsider either. I've been able to get kind of this in-between role where, after living in Korea for 17 years, I'm no longer an outsider with an outsider's perspective, but I'm not completely an insider either. And so this is I don't know, I think it's an interesting place to be because you can see things in a way that the ordinary Korean audience might not notice things that I notice. And the same goes true for a foreign audience. And so because I'm in this area that not many other people occupy, it allows me to do a lot of interesting work.
Definitely an interesting gateway. So, given these kind of ties you have with the industry and the time you've spent here, you must have quite a few stories to tell. Is there anything quite memorable you'd like to share with us?
I don't know. I mean, there are a few stories that I can't tell. I don't know. I mean, I mean, certainly when I look back on this in 20 or 30 years, one of the things I'll remember is being asked to act in a movie after spending all these years writing about movies, and then, and it was a weird experience because I'd done an independent film before this, but I remember getting this phone call before going in to see it, a press screening, and I don't know, for me, I don't know if this is the case for other foreigners, but whenever I answer the phone and someone starts speaking Korean, I always understand what they say except for the name. Like, I always miss the name. And it's embarrassing because if I ask, who, then they think that I've forgotten who they are. And so usually I just kind of say, oh, yes, and then we continue the conversation. And in the course of the conversation, I figure out who it is that I'm talking to. But in this case, this person said, hi, I'm producer, blah, blah, blah. I work with director, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't hear who it was. And during the phone call, he told me that this director was interested in casting me in his next film. And, and it sounded like a big director because he didn't really explain who the director was. He just said the name as if, obviously I know who he's talking about. And so we agreed to meet the following week at the Busan Film Festival to talk about it in more detail. And I hung up the phone and realized, I don't know who this is. And so for a week, I knew that I'd been asked to act in a film by a director, and I didn't know who it was, and I was intensely curious. And so in Busan, the phone call came, and this time I heard it was Im Sang-soo. And, in one sense, I was just elated because I'm a big admirer of his work. The President's Last Bang and A Good Lawyer's Wife are some of my favorite Korean films ever. But then suddenly I was struck with fear, and I thought, oh God, what if he asked me to do something really perverted? And you've seen the film. So Yeah, the rest is history.
It certainly is. But a great big commercial debut, I'd say. So speaking about promoting Korean film, you're kind of in this middle ground between the international audience and the local industry. In today's kind of environment, as the Korean film industry morphs constantly, what do you think needs to be done to kind of renew kind of foreign interest in Korean films?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue that I've thought about a lot over the years. And I think that when I was first starting out, the thing that was needed the most was just more information about Korean cinema, because there was very much a lack of it at that time. And if you want to, convince someone to become a fan of Korean cinema, then you need to give them information about the new films that are coming out. And I think that great progress has been made in that over the past decade. Thanks, partly to people like you, partly to Kofik, and the film companies selling these films do a better job at promoting them than they used to. But if you know where to look, there's a lot of information now about Korean films, and so in a sense, the infrastructure is in place to promote Korean cinema abroad. People need to do their jobs well. Critics need to write about Korean films with, in a persuasive way, and teachers who are teaching about Korean cinema need to do it with passion. But in a way, I think that, almost the most effective thing, I think sometimes is a very personal and almost grassroots kind of approach. For me personally, I became interested in Korean cinema because some of my friends encouraged me to watch Korean films, and they'd express their interest and their passion in Korean cinema. And I think even these days too, there's so many Koreans studying abroad. And I think that when they make friends and when they introduce Korean films to their friends, I think that is much more important and effective than people realize. And so the government and everybody else needs to continue to do the work that they're doing. But But I think it is kind of this big grassroots effort if we want to expand Korean cinema, if we want to introduce it to more people around the world.
Absolutely. I think this the kind of passion that the industry can inspire has really helped a lot. I know that's kind of what got me hooked. I mean, I fell into Korean film by accident, but what kind of kept me going was reading sites like yours 10 years ago and finding that people just, I wasn't crazy. There's something really interesting going on here. So you program for the San Sebastian International Film Festival and the Udine Far East Film Festival. We met for the first time at the latter in 2012. So what role would you say these festivals have in the promotion of Korean film?
Some people look at festivals as kind of an alternate film distribution route, that, films that aren't quite as commercial and may not get a chance to be screened in a lot of theaters, they get a chance to be seen at film festivals. And so that's part of it, but I think that, one of the big things about film festivals is that it's a place where you can go and kind of discover something by accident, or you hear people talking about a certain film that you didn't know about before, and so then you decide to go see it, or you become interested in that film. And so, film festivals are these communities where it becomes possible to come across films that you ordinarily wouldn't come across. Particularly, I think most people are kind of naturally passive in the way they watch films. They wait for to hear news about the big films, or they see what other people are seeing, and then they become curious and go see the same films. But there's a different dynamic at festivals, and so I think it helps smaller films or films that are less likely to get the big marketing push.
Absolutely. Korea makes a lot of films. Overseas, a lot of the films that have been successful have been revenge thrillers, particularly in Western markets. These days, what do you think are the Korean films that are playing well abroad?
I don't know, it is a real mix, but it seems that, one formula that's worked really well for Korean cinema, both in the past, and I think the same is true now, is the idea of taking a particular genre and then doing something really interesting with it. And of course, directors like Park Chan-wook and Kim Ji-yoon and Bong Joon-ho excel at this type of approach, and that's one thing that really has helped them to, expand their careers beyond Korea and to work internationally. I'm still looking forward to seeing Snowpiercer released in the U.S. and other major territories to see how well it does there. But certainly that's not the only type of film. I think that Korea has such a diverse industry. I think all these films have potential in different ways, but I think these days the films that do get the most attention are these type of kind of ambitious genre films that play with the conventions of the genre in interesting ways.
I think we're seeing a lot of that in general. A lot of genre films are doing well these days. People are recognizing sometimes genre films can be a little cheaper to produce, easier to market, and certainly get kind of fanboys and things interested. I know I'm one of them. So you're a big fan of, as well as promoter of classic Korean films. When I visited Udine 2 years ago, you were staging a retrospective, The Darkest Decade of Korean Cinema, a retrospective of 1970s Korean films. There are 10 films. There are some truly excellent films that were playing. And yet outside of that kind of a venue, it's extremely rare for people to have the opportunity to watch classic Korean films. Recently, The Housemaid, the kind of arguably the most famous of the classic Korean films, a film from 1960 by director Kim Ki-young, was released on the famed Criterion Collection, albeit as part of a box set. But outside of that, there's really nothing. So what do you think can be done to change this? Is it really changing?
I don't know. I think that it's really difficult. And this is a field where I think the infrastructure, there are some issues with older films that is not true about contemporary films. And if you compare the situation with classic Korean films to that of classic Japanese films, one advantage that Japan has is that, all these older films by Kurosawa or lesser-known directors, they're owned by companies like Shochiku and Toho that still exist right now, and they have, they're well-run companies with have the ability to sell these films around the world, and they pay attention to these films. Whereas almost all the companies that existed in the 60s and 70s in Korea have disappeared because the industry has changed so much. And so partly it's just a copyright issue that the people who have the copyrights to these films, at this point, many of them are elderly and they don't have a particular company that is in charge of promoting these films. And so it's difficult for festivals to screen them. And I think that, if there were like sales companies that specialized in classic Korean films and went out to markets and tried to sell them aggressively, then they might make more progress than they are right now. But of course, also it's difficult to kind of spread awareness of these films because for so many years there was just kind of no information about older films, and now there are some rediscoveries of, Kim Gi-young came first, and Lee Man-hee is getting more and more attention these days. Certainly the films are very interesting, and I do want to kind of applaud the Korean Film Archive for doing excellent work with the small budget that they have available to them.
Absolutely.
And, they have a great service on YouTube, this YouTube channel, YouTube/Korean
Film. Yeah, I recommend that to anyone. 72 films there. Very much worth watching.
And so more is becoming available, but this is an uphill struggle, and perhaps it will take more time to see these films get, proper recognition.
Of course, I certainly hope that they will be granted further recognition, because there truly are some just masterpieces of classic international cinema, and it'd be great to kind of share that with more audiences. So finally, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what some of your favorite Korean films are. Now, I know what your favorite is. I think we have the same favorites.
Yeah.
That being, of course, Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder. But besides that, are there any big Korean films that you would recommend to people?
I don't know. There are films that I have this great affection for, and maybe I won't sit down and try to argue that they're the best Korean films ever. But there are a few of them, like, Paju, for example, by director Park Chan-wook. She's a really interesting filmmaker. People confuse her with Park Chan-wook because
I did the first time.
both in English and in Korean, their names look very similar. But she's made 2 features so far. Jealousy Is My Middle Name from 2002 is also a really interesting film. And so I look forward to her work in the future. I don't know the status of her next project, but
it has been a while.
Yeah, she's just a really interesting filmmaker who makes complex films that you can watch over and over again and continue to find new interesting things in them. I really like the film My Dear Enemy with Chun Do-yeon and Ha Jung-woo. It's a real kind of showcase of acting talent. Even though in a way it's a very modest sort of film, it's not a film where very much dramatic happens. And it's just about these 2 people who end up spending the day together, going around visiting people, trying to borrow money. But Chun Do-yeon, of course, is just this great gift that's been given to the Korean film industry. And Ha Jung-woo is well worth being her co-star in this film. And so it's a really well-made film that I think, despite being this very quiet and unassuming film, I think it leaves an impression.
Well, those are 2 great recommendations. I very much have enjoyed those as well, and I hope that both of them, Park Chan-wook and Lee Yoon-ki, will be giving us a new film in the near future. So, Darcy, thank you so much for joining us. You truly are just a man of many hats. You've achieved a lot, and of course, I'm very grateful for what you've done to kind of get me interested, and so many other people in the great gifts that Korean cinema has to offer. So, thank you very much for joining us in the studio today.
Oh, thanks. It was a pleasure.
For this week's In Focus, I'd like to talk about one of the new films that will be premiering at the 64th Berlin International Film Festival. The film is a documentary. It's called A Dream of Iron. It's by the director Kelvin Kyung-kun Park. It's his second feature-length film, his first being Cheonggyecheon Medley, A Dream of Iron, which was also screened in Berlin back in 2011. A Dream of Iron is actually an extension of a series of visual installations that he had in museums, which feature kind of these moving tableaus of the POSCO the steelmaking factory, which is the fourth largest of its kind, which is in Pohang, which is on the just on the southern coast. It's kind of it just goes through this process of steel making and eventually through to shipbuilding, and that's really what it is in terms of narrative. It's about a 90-minute film, but it's truly I found it completely hypnotic. It's a film I didn't really know much going into it. I didn't know so much about the background either, but a beautiful film. You see these kind of very large tableaus of boats being made, and it's very impressive and kind of terrifying. But also it's like you have these workers who are working on these enormous parts of steel, and they're like small artists within the frame. It's a really wonderful film that I hope people will enjoy when it screens in Berlin. So that's my recommendation this week for In Focus, and that's it for this episode of Korean Cinema Today. We had a great talk with Darcy Paquet about his career and about promoting Korean films overseas. So we hope that you will tune in again next time, and to visit our site, which is koreanfilm.or.kr, to find some news and to listen to Korean Cinema Today once again. So that's it for this week, and thank you for joining us, and tune in again next time.